Parker Kent didn't do chaos, not in his schedule, not in his meetings, and definitely not in the middle of his own corporate lobby, but today, chaos found him in the form of a spilled coffee, a snapped briefcase clasp, and 500 loose pages crashing to the marble floor. Damn it, he muttered under his breath as papers spiraled like snowflakes around his expensive Italian loafers. He dropped to one knee, trying to collect the mess before anyone noticed the CEO of Kent Capital practically crawling on the floor. But of course, someone did. Of course. "I think you dropped your entire life," a warm voice said, kneeling beside him. Parker glanced sideways and saw her dark curls pulled into a loose bun, flush cheeks, and a tailored navy blazer that didn't look designer but still managed to make her look like she belonged in this building. "I did," he said, meeting her eyes briefly. "And apparently my dignity too." She laughed. "Well, lucky for you, I'm good at saving lost things." Her fingers brushed his as they both reached for the same page. Parker blinked. There were 100 things on his mind: an investor call in 15 minutes, a missed breakfast, a board member who wouldn't stop calling him about a merger, but none of them mattered when she looked up at him with that smile. It was the kind of smile that made you forget you were in a corporate skyscraper and not some indie rom-com. "Thanks," he said, clearing his throat and standing. She stood too, holding out a small stack of papers she'd gathered. "No problem. I work upstairs. Marketing. I'm Grace Kellan." She tucked a curl behind her ear and held out her hand. Parker hesitated. She didn't know who he was. "Parker," he said simply, shaking her hand. "Thanks, Grace." She tilted her head. "No last name." He gave a half shrug. "Let's just say I'm trying something new today, anonymity." Grace laughed again and pulled her ID badge from her pocket. "Well, Parker with no last name, you owe me a coffee. You've got ink all over your shirt and I'm pretty sure this one's mine." She showed him a paper cup with his initials scribbled on the side in Sharpie. He glanced down. She was right. He grabbed the wrong cup from the counter. "All right," he said, actually smiling now. "Rain check. I've got a meeting in." He checked his watch, 11 minutes. "Then you better run." She handed him the last page, turned, and disappeared into the elevator. Parker stared after her, still holding the paper she'd handed him. He didn't even look at it. For the first time in years, he showed up to a meeting late and didn't care. It wasn't until 2 days later that he saw her again. She didn't see him. She was leading a presentation in the marketing conference room. He stopped mid-step just outside the glass wall, watching her move through slides with sharp wit and confidence that had the entire room hanging onto her words. When the meeting ended and people started filing out, he slipped inside just as she was gathering her things. "You're not supposed to be in here," she said without looking up. "I came to return your coffee," he said, holding out a large caramel latte with her name on the side. She looked up and smiled. "You remembered." "I remember everything," he said simply. "Especially people who make me laugh when I'm crawling on the floor of my own building." Her eyes widened. "Wait, your building?" He nodded once. "Parker Kent." Grace's mouth dropped open. "You're the Parker Kent?" "Guilty." She blinked. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I liked the way you looked at me, like I wasn't just another name on the door." Grace stared at him for a moment, then took the coffee. "Well, that's fair." They stood there in silence for a second too long. Then Grace broke it. "So, Parker Kent, CEO of everything, why are you bringing me coffee?" "Because I want to take you to dinner," he said without hesitation. She raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know me." "I know you helped me when you didn't have to. You made me laugh when I wanted to snap. And you didn't care who I was. That's enough for me to want to find out the rest." Grace bit her lip, clearly torn. "I have a rule about dating people with their name on the building. I have a rule about not letting people like you walk away," he countered. She looked up at him, eyes filled with something curious and careful. "One dinner." He smiled. "That's all I need." He took her to Vero, a private rooftop restaurant that didn't even take reservations unless you knew someone with a black card. She wore a black dress, simple, elegant, and nothing like the flashy women he'd been around lately. She looked nervous at first, but loosened up after the first course and a glass of red wine. "This view is ridiculous," she said, leaning over the glass railing after dessert. "So are you," he said quietly. She turned. "What?" He stepped closer. "You're ridiculous. For being funny and smart and not even realizing it. For not letting me impress you with my title. For saying yes to dinner even when you clearly think I'm a walking red flag." Grace laughed, then looked at him. Really looked. "I don't know what this is," she said honestly. "But you're not what I expected. Good or bad? Still deciding." He smiled. "Then let me help you make up your mind." He kissed her. It wasn't slow or hesitant. It was bold like him. And when she kissed him back, her hands in his hair, he knew this wasn't going to be a one-time thing. And for the first time in his life, Parker Kent didn't care about the next meeting, the next deal, or the next dollar. All he wanted was her. Grace didn't expect to see him again so soon. She definitely didn't expect him to show up unannounced in the marketing floor's common space the following afternoon. Sleeves rolled up, holding 2 paper bags from a bistro no one could usually get into without a waitlist and a personal recommendation from a Michelin chef. "You're not serious," she said, blinking as he set one down on the table beside her laptop. "I am if you're hungry," Parker replied, pulling out a chair as though he belonged there, in her world, without a tie, without a title, without asking permission. "Do you normally bring gourmet lunches to your employees?" she asked, eyeing the bag like it might explode. "No," he said, unwrapping a sandwich. "Just the ones I want to impress." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not supposed to date employees. Isn't that like a corporate policy? I own the policy. I can adjust it." "That's wildly inappropriate," she muttered, though her fingers were already lifting the lid on the container he'd brought her. The smell of roasted garlic and truffle oil curled upward like an edible seduction. "I'm wildly inappropriate," he said, shrugging. "But I'm also respectful. If this makes you uncomfortable, I'll back off." Grace studied him. He wasn't leaning in or staring her down. He wasn't even watching her reaction like most men would. He was unwrapping his own food like this was the most normal thing in the world. And somehow that made it harder to say no. "You do realize this is going to start rumors," she said, taking a bite. "I hope it does," he replied. "I'd rather people talk about me bringing you lunch than you pretending we didn't kiss on a rooftop." Her face flushed. "You're relentless. That's what built a billion-dollar company." She rolled her eyes. "I thought you said you wanted to stay anonymous." "I changed my mind." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. He wasn't playing. He wasn't flirting just to pass time. He was pursuing her like he pursued everything else, with focus, intensity, and a kind of quiet certainty that made it hard to breathe. They didn't talk much after that, too busy eating and pretending this wasn't the most surreal lunch break of her life. But just before he left, he pulled out a folded note and slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "A challenge," he said. "Read it when I'm gone." Then he was gone, walking back toward the private elevator as if he hadn't just dropped another unexpected twist in her already complicated day. She waited until the room emptied before opening it. It read, "If you say yes, meet me at the corner of 5th and Alder at 7. Wear something you'd wear to a gallery opening. I'll handle the rest." Grace exhaled slowly. Her heart was already miles ahead of her brain. That evening, she found herself standing under a flickering street lamp, wearing a sapphire blouse tucked into black slacks and heels that pinched just enough to remind her she was out of her depth. The street was quiet, except for the occasional car zooming past. Then a sleek Blacktown car pulled up. The window rolled down. "You came?" Parker said from inside, his voice softer in the dark. She nodded, stepping in. He didn't say where they were going. The car turned down unfamiliar streets until it stopped in front of an unmarked building with double glass doors and no signage. He guided her inside, hand gently resting at the small of her back, and suddenly they were standing in a private art exhibit, no one else in sight. Paintings, sculptures, and installations filled the space with color and shadows. A woman with a clipboard nodded at Parker and disappeared behind a curtain. I rented it for the evening, he said casually. You rented an entire gallery? He looked at her. I wanted to see how you react to art. She stared at a piece in front of them, a chaotic burst of color and movement that somehow felt like exactly what was happening inside her. You're not what I expected, she said finally. He turned to face her. And what did you expect? Cold, detached, maybe charming in a rehearsed way. But this, she gestured around the room. This is personal. He stepped closer, expression unreadable. That's the point. Grace felt something shift then. Not just in the air between them, but inside her, like a wall she didn't know she'd built had cracked. Why me, Parker? She asked, voice low. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone, he said. I want the woman who told me I didn't need a last name. The one who didn't flinch when I said I was the CEO. The one who's still here, even though her instincts are probably screaming at her to run. She swallowed. They are. But you're not. No, she whispered. I'm not. He reached out then, not to kiss her, but to take her hand. His fingers wrapped around hers like they'd done it 1,000 times. Stay, he said. She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because she already had. 3 weeks later, Grace stepped out of the car and stared up at the townhouse nestled in the West Village. It was understated compared to the properties Parker usually appeared in. No valet, no marble drive, no sleek glass facade. Just ivy-wrapped bricks, warm lantern lights, and a door painted the color of old wine. Why are we here? She asked as Parker joined her on the sidewalk, his coat collar turned up against the wind. You said you wanted to see where I go when I'm not being Parker Kent. I meant hypothetically, she said, teeth chattering. I don't do hypotheticals, he said, unlocking the door. Inside, it smelled like cedar and something faintly citrus. The space was narrow but tall, with books stacked in haphazard towers beside mid-century furniture and oil paintings that didn't match. A record player spun something soft in the background. Nothing about it screamed billionaire. It felt like a place someone actually lived. I bought it before the company took off, he said, tossing his keys into a ceramic bowl. Didn't want to let it go? You live here. When I need to remember who I was before everything got loud. She walked slowly through the living room, fingers trailing the edge of an old piano. I thought you were always this. He followed her gaze. I was a broke graduate student with a chipped laptop and a caffeine addiction. The noise came later. The silence is harder to keep. Grace turned. Is this your way of showing me you're still human? No. This is my way of showing you where I go when I'm tired of pretending I'm not. She stepped into the kitchen. It had scuffed cabinets and an ancient espresso machine. You cook. When I don't want to be watched over a white tablecloth. She leaned against the counter. You're harder to categorize than I thought. That's the point. There was a pause. The air between them shifted. I got a job offer, she said suddenly. He didn't respond. It's in San Francisco. A startup. They want me to lead their branding overhaul. He folded his arms. When did this happen? Last week. And you didn't tell me? She met his gaze. Because I didn't want it to be about you. Grace, I need to know it's mine. That I earned it. Not because I'm dating the man at the top floor. He nodded slowly, jaw tightening. You think I do that to you? I think people talk. And I think I've worked too hard to be someone's plus one. You're not my plus one. You're the only part of my day that doesn't feel scripted. She looked away. I haven't said yes yet. Why not? Because I don't know what this is. He stepped closer, voice low. It's the most honest thing I've had in years. She didn't move, but her voice trembled. And if I leave, you'll still be the most honest thing I've had in years. Her breath caught. But, he added, as locked on hers, I'm not going to pretend it won't gut me. He turned then, walking to the window, hands sliding into his pockets like he was holding himself together by force. She followed. I'm scared. So am I. I've seen what happens when someone gets too close to you. You shut down. You deflect. You disappear. I don't disappear. I retreat. To where? He glanced at her. Here. She leaned her forehead against the cold glass. I don't want to be a retreat. Then don't be. He stepped behind her, voice softer now. Be the reason I don't need one. She turned slowly. You said you remember everything. I do. Then remember this. She kissed him. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was steady, like choosing something and standing by it. When she pulled back, her voice cracked. I haven't made a decision yet. Then let me give you a reason to stay. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black envelope. No logo. No seal. She took it, heart pounding. Inside was a single ticket. One way. First class. New York to San Francisco. She looked up. You're sending me away? No, he said. I'm giving you a choice. You can stay because you want to, not because I made it harder to leave. Grace stared at him. I built a life around control, he said, voice raw. But I don't want to control you. I want you to choose me. And if you don't, I'll still be proud of you. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them away. You're dangerous, she whispered. I know. He stepped back, gave her one last nod, and left her standing in the middle of the room, ticket in hand, silence pressing in like a storm waiting to break. The plane left without her. Grace stood at the terminal window long after the last boarding call echoed through the quiet gate. The ticket sat in her coat pocket, untouched. She didn't need to look at it again. She'd memorized every detail, the gate, the seat, the flight time, because she'd considered it. She truly considered it. But she hadn't boarded. The decision didn't feel like a declaration, not at first. It felt like a quiet truth she'd finally let herself admit. She didn't want to build something from scratch when what she really wanted was to see what could grow from the chaos she now called Parker Kent. 2 days passed before she saw him again. She found him not in a penthouse or a townhouse, but in the last place she would have expected, a community center in Harlem, standing in front of a whiteboard with a marker in hand, explaining equity to a group of teens who looked at him like he was made of gold and fire. She didn't interrupt. She watched from the back of the room as he broke down venture capital like it was poetry, simple, rhythmic, powerful. He was dressed in jeans and a navy sweater, no watch, no assistant, no security. Just him. Teaching. Laughing. Listening. After the session ended and the kids filtered out, he turned and saw her. His hand dropped from the board. You're not in California, he said. No, she said, walking toward him. I'm not. I didn't want to ask. You didn't have to. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't think I'd see you here. I didn't think I'd find you here. He looked at the whiteboard like it might give him the right words. Then he looked at her. I've been coming here for years, he said. It's where I learned about risk. Not the kind you take in business. The kind you take when you decide not to become the worst version of yourself. She nodded slowly. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think I was trying to impress you. I'm already impressed. He stepped toward her. Close enough she could smell the faint trace of citrus again. You didn't take the job. I didn't want to build something that didn't have you in it. I didn't want you to give up something for me. I didn't, she said. I gave it up for me. His eyes searched hers. Are you sure? I'm sure I want to see where this goes. I'm sure I'd regret walking away more than I'd ever regret risking my pride. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. He just stood there, breathing like the ground had tilted beneath him. I haven't been in love in a long time, he said. I haven't let myself be, she replied. He reached for her hand, slow and certain. I'm scared of what this means. Me too, she whispered. But I want to build something with you, he said, voice steady. Not a company. Not a brand. A life. She blinked and tears slipped down without warning. But she didn't look away. I want messy, she said. I want real. I want a man who drops his entire life in the middle of a lobby and still has the presence of mind to say thank you. He laughed and it broke whatever tension still lingered. He pulled her into his arms, and this time when he kissed her, it was soft and certain, like something they'd both earned. Later that night, he took her to a rooftop, not the same one from their first kiss. This one was smaller, framed by string lights and the distant sound of jazz filtering up from the street below. A small table had been set with candles and 2 plates of pasta cooling in the evening air. I cooked, he said, pouring her wine. I'm terrified, she joked, sitting. Just try it before you insult my grandmother's recipe. They talked. Not about work. Not about the company. Just about books they'd never finished, movies they hated, dreams they were too embarrassed to say aloud. She told him about the time she nearly quit marketing to open a bookstore in Vermont. He told her about the night he lost his first investor and thought it was all over. They were halfway through dessert when he reached into his jacket and pulled out something small and velvet. Her breath caught. He didn't open it. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said. "Not tonight." She raised a brow. "Then what are you doing with that?" He set the box between them. "I want you to keep it. As a promise. That when the time is right, I'll ask. But only if you still want me to." She opened the box. Inside was a ring not huge, not flashy. It was antique, delicate, and clearly chosen with care. A single emerald-cut diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "You carry this around in your pocket?" "I've had it for a week." "You what?" "I bought it the day after you kissed me in the gallery. I didn't know what would happen. I just knew I wasn't letting you disappear." She stared at it, then closed the lid. "You're out of your mind," she said. "I know." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'll keep it. But I'm not promising anything yet." "I wouldn't want you to," he said. "I just want you to stay." "I already did." Weeks passed. The whispers through the office faded. The board stopped asking questions when it became clear that Grace Kellan wasn't just another passing interest. She was the only woman who ever made Parker Kent skip meetings, take vacations, and spend entire afternoons in the marketing department asking questions he already knew the answers to just to hear her voice. He never asked her to move in. She came on her own, one suitcase at a time, until his townhouse stopped being his and started being theirs. She kept the ring in a drawer beside her bed, and she never stopped chasing her own brilliance. He never tried to dim it, and when he finally did ask on a pier at sunrise, with no one around but a violinist playing something classical and wild, she said yes. Not because she had to, because she still wanted to. Rain patterned lightly against the townhouse windows, a quiet percussion to the low jazz humming from the turntable in the corner. Grace stood in the living room, barefoot on the hardwood, flipping through a thick portfolio of mock-ups. Her hair was damp from the walk home, her cheeks flushed from the wind, and her eyes trained on a series of bold concepts scrawled in charcoal and ink. Parker leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her. She hadn't noticed him yet, too deep in the swirl of ideas and critique. He didn't say anything. He liked watching her like this, in her own rhythm, unfiltered and absorbed. Grace finally looked up. "You changed the logo." "I didn't touch it," he said. "That was you last week. You scratched it out and redesigned it during dinner." She glanced down, then laughed. "Right? I forgot." He stepped forward, took the portfolio from her hands, and set it on the coffee table. "You haven't stopped working since you got home. You haven't stopped watching me." "Guilty." She moved closer, resting her chin against his chest. "I've been thinking about something. If it's the gallery again, I already called. They said we've officially spent more on renting that space than their last 3 events combined." "It's not about the gallery," she said, tilting her head. "It's about your board. They're not an issue." "I know that," she said. "But I think I want to show them something." Parker's brow lifted. "What kind of something?" "I want to pitch the rebrand myself. Publicly. To the full executive board. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me," she said. "I've spent so long being careful. Careful to stay out of the spotlight. Careful not to be seen as the girl who got ahead because of a man. But I want to be seen now. Not because of you. With you." Parker brushed a damp curl from her forehead. "Then I'll clear the entire floor and give you the biggest screen in the building." "I don't want the biggest screen," she said. "I want the hardest room." His eyes held hers. "You've got it. And I want you in the last row. Only if you let me clap louder than anyone." She smiled. "Deal." The presentation happened the following Thursday. Grace stood in heels that pinched and a dress she'd chosen because it made her feel like she owned the room, not borrowed it. She didn't flinch when she walked into the boardroom, didn't hesitate when the screen behind her lit up with the new branding initiative she'd built from scratch. Parker sat in the back, silent, watching her command the space like she was born to do it. She didn't mention him once. Not his name, not his title, not even a glance in his direction. She was there on her own terms, And when the last slide clicked into place and the room erupted in questions, then compliments, then applause, Parker didn't clap first. He waited until she turned, looked straight at him, and nodded. That night, she found him in the townhouse kitchen, sleeves rolled, apron on, something bubbling on the stove. "Are you cooking again?" she asked, dropping her bag. "I'm attempting it. You crushed that room. I didn't even see you leave. I didn't want to distract you." "You wouldn't have," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist. "But thank you." He turned, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I've been thinking about something too. If it's another antique ring, I swear it's not," he said, laughing. "It's a house." She pulled back. "A house? Upstate? On a lake? Stone fireplace, wraparound porch, the works. You want to move?" "No. I want to have somewhere quiet," he said. "Somewhere to go when the city gets loud. Somewhere for you to paint. Somewhere we can be still." She blinked. "You've already bought it, haven't you?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. "I wanted it to be ours." Grace took it, turning it over in her palm. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She studied him. "When?" "Tomorrow," he said. "I had it stocked and cleaned. There's food, wine, blankets, and no cell service for miles." She stared. "You planned all of this?" "I want to take you somewhere without schedules. Without meetings. Just us." "You know I still haven't said yes." Parker held her gaze. "I'm not asking again. Not yet." "Good," she said, tucking the key into her pocket. "Because when I do, I want it to be loud. Messy. Probably public. I'd expect nothing less." They left the next morning before sunrise. The drive took them through winding roads and thick woods until the lake appeared like glass between the trees. The house was even more beautiful than she expected, old stone wrapped in ivy, windows that faced the water, and a porch swing that creaked when she sat on it. He lit a fire that night, and they lay tangled on an old leather couch, watching flames dance. "I used to think love was supposed to be quiet," she said, skin warm against his. "And now I think it's supposed to sound like this," she said. "Like firewood cracking, like laughter, like rain on a roof." He kissed her shoulder. "I want to marry you here." Grace blinked. "Here, on the porch, with the lake behind us, barefoot. No suits, no speeches, just you and me." She turned to face him. "You're not going to ask again, are you?" "No." "Good," she said, then paused. "Because I'm ready to say yes." He didn't move. She sat up slightly, brushing her fingers through his hair. "I want to build a life with you. Not the one people expect. The one we choose." He reached into the drawer beside the couch. "You keep the ring here?" "I keep everything important close." She took it, slid it on herself. They didn't tell anyone for a week. They stayed in the house, cooked badly, danced barefoot, read books out loud, and wrote lists of places they'd never been. When they finally returned to the city, the world kept turning, but slower now. More intentional. They got married that fall, just like he said. On the porch. Barefoot. Grace wore a linen dress and flowers in her hair. Parker wore a white shirt rolled to the elbows and a look on his face like he couldn't believe someone like her had chosen someone like him. There were no speeches. Just vows. And laughter. And the sound of wind moving across the lake. By the time the first snow fell, they were settled in like the house had always belonged to them. Grace painted in the mornings. Parker worked from the study when he had to. They made pancakes on Sundays and built a library wall in the living room. They didn't chase perfection. They chased moments. And they caught them. Together.